This is a Courier Talking Football. I'm Eric Nicholson. With me this week are Jim Spence and Sean Hamilton. Well, guys, we're going to get back into local stuff soon, but we can box off Scotland now for a wee while and get your reflections on Euro 2020 and our part in it. Let's start off with Steve Clarke, Jim. How many points? How are you going to rate him out of 10?
I suspect about 4, Eric, because ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you look on this. And I was a fan of his appointment for a couple of reasons. I thought he'd done a terrific job at Kilmarnock, and I know it's an entirely different kind of thing, going from club management to national management. I was a fan, and to some extent still am, I have to say. Wish it would be a bit more positive. But the truth of the matter is, once again, we've emerged from a group with 1 point from 9. One draw against England, which I think we were always going to be up for, and they're not as good as they thought they were. We certainly know either. But ultimately, we have proven ourselves on the international stage again as lightweights or make weights. So it's been enormously disappointing. I mean, I think there are some positive things to come from it. We know that, but ultimately, we failed. That's the bottom line. We failed to reach the latter stages. When a nation like Croatia, with a smaller population, have done so and have proven on the day and over the piece that they have players that are just way in excess of anything that we have. So 4 out of 10.
Right. Before we get into a bit more detail about the different reasons for the 4 out of 10 and basically sort of picking over the bones, Sean, are you going to go higher than 4? Lower?
I'm going to go higher.
Higher.
5.
Okay, there you go. That's fine.
Last of the big spender.
I thought you'd come in with the standard man by markings and give them a 6.
Well, 6.
But there we go.
You start with a 6, don't you? Yeah.
So you go with 5. A brief explanation why you're giving them a 5.
I just think, particularly if you look at the Czech Republic game, it was over before it began with that.
I'm giving them a 3. I'll give them a 3 for the Czech Republic game. Actually,
that was incredibly poor. Yes. And all right, we lost Kieran Tierney just before it, but I think the reaction to that was odd. And then to go with one up top and what looked like the most winnable of the 3, it's inexplicable. I just don't get it. I don't know why that happened, and changing it at half time was indicative of the fact that he acknowledged that it hadn't been right. I don't think, or certainly that it wasn't working. And I think that one was just a disaster. And I think you could lay a lot of the blame for that one at Steve Clarke's door. And all right, England, Wembley, massive game, as Jim says. There was never going to be any doubt they would be up for it, and they certainly were. But they played well.
And tactically, you got it spot on that one as
Absolutely.
well. Let's be fair.
That was a good one. But then Croatia, and losing Gilmour as well. Do you know what? I'm going to give him a 6.
Oh, you're going up to 6? Oh, well,
yeah, I'm going to move up to a 6 because maybe I was being too harsh there, because there were a couple of factors that didn't help him, certainly. But again, some decision making in the last game was a bit questionable when it came to subbies and stuff as well.
Subbies I've seen a wee bit random. But here's my take, having watched all 3. Yes, I think the unlucky bit is clearly the Tierney injury and the Gilmour COVID-19. I mean, that is, but it's tournament football. You could have got, COVID-19, someone, Every's factoring in, St Johnstone had to factor it in, at the end of there, when the season was coming to its crescendo for them. You get injuries. The other unlucky, if you can call it unlucky, I think, the timing of the Croatia game probably turned out to be, they rolled back the years. The Croatia didn't play like that in the first 2 games, and they hadn't really played like that in the months, possibly about a year, building up to it since the last World Cup. So you could say maybe we helped them roll back the years, but it was an absolute privilege to watch Luka Modric do his thing at Hampden Park the other night. I mean, it was an absolute masterclass, and I think it would have been brilliant for wee Billy Gilmour's education just to be on the same pitch as him, and it was. Listen, they would have beaten us with Billy Gilmour on the pitch, and I kind of have a bit of sympathy for the team he picked against Croatia, because we wrote about it. I wrote about it. Alan Temple wrote about it. The sort of the closest stylistically like for Gilmore was John Fleck, but yeah, John Fleck had the COVID. He hasn't played a lot of football for Sheffield United. He hasn't had a great season, and I can see why he went for Stuart Armstrong. But I'll be honest, Jim, I thought Stuart Armstrong was one of the biggest failures of that tournament for me. I know he's come from our patch, but I thought he was really poor against the Czechs, and I could see, quite frankly, why the centre halves were deciding to go along as the game progressed, because he's basic turning, keeping a possession and moving on. I know that's not his absolute, the key to his game. It's not what's got him the big moves. It's not what's got him the sort of, it's got him the career he has. It's about the energy. It's about the drive. It's about helping the sport and the strikers. But you'd expect a central midfielder to be able to pass and move better than that, wouldn't you, Jim? Or am I being harsh on him here?
I think so. I mean, I'm tempted, but with Sean kind of lightening the mood there, I'm tempted to go 4.5 for Steve. But
no, it's a better headline to say 4. Don't go backtracking.
It's just that sympathetic element of my nature. But no, I mean, look, what's the bottom line in this? I mean, I know that Steve Clarke will say I've got to look at performances, no round showings, and he does. That's true. That's absolutely true. And I'm not for a moment am I suggesting he should call it a day Scotland manager. I think we're on the verge of something very decent.
He needs to learn lessons, doesn't he?
Well, I think the danger here is we talk glibly sometimes about learning lessons, and then don't actually see what we've learned 2 or 3 games on. But the bottom line is pretty simple. We were there to try and qualify, and we didn't qualify. And in that respect, the manager's job is to make the best of what he has available. Now, I don't think anyone is arguing that what he has available is as good as what Croatia have available, or any of the other top nations, or in fact, indeed, most of the nations in that tournament. Because, I think a generation of, I may address this my courier column for the weekend, I think a generation of Scottish coaches who have been egotists and narcissists, frankly, who it's been more about them, have to a great extent sucked the enjoyment and the inventiveness and all the thrill of a generation of young players.
He says May, Sean. He's written it already, hasn't he? He knows he's...
I'm just tidying
here's
it up.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
I often change my mind later on, But no, I mean, I think and the job of the international manager is to deal with what he has. So I think in terms of quality, I mean, you're obviously always biased. I mean, we've watched Stuart Armstrong. He's a fine player coming through, but it wasn't a good tournament for him. We went long. Nothing wrong with going long. We see right regular examples of brilliant 60-yard passes. I mean, it's great if they're executed properly, played into space. It's great if the front men, either one or two, have the ability to execute the immediate kill or trap of the ball and do something with it. We had neither, really, to be honest with you. I mean, we didn't go with Adams in the first game, which I thought probably on balance might have been a mistake. And then we did go to up top. I'm not particularly convinced that the two we've got up top necessarily have the quality to deal with the long diagonal balls, either, playing close enough together, linkage-wise, or, bringing it under control, getting shots away on target and all the rest of it. I mean, by comparison to some teams, most teams, in fact, that had two up top, we have a lack of top-class quality. That's not knocking these guys. They're good quality professionals, but they're not top quality, and we're up against nations that have top quality. That's simple, and particularly in Croatia, who hadn't been brilliant until then, but you sensed that if they did turn it on, they had many more gears to go through than we did. So I think it was a combination of things. I think we should have been more positive. I could have been more positive. I think the first game against the Czechs was a game that we really had to not be gung ho in, but we had to be, I think, a wee bit more positive.
And our better players had to turn up. We needed.
That's right.
I'm convinced that if Steve Clarke, Sean, if he'd picked the right team for that first game, and across the board we'd got 7, 8s and 9s from our players, we'd have won that game, So that's what it comes down, and we didn't do it. So there you go. That was the group, basically. That was the group, and so anyway, there'll be plenty of other. You've read plenty of critiques of what happened and all the rest of it, and probably some folk will have listened to them. But let's move it on. Where does he who does he have to be looking to bring in? Who should we be thinking? We've seen enough now, because tournament football it really exposes things, doesn't it? And accelerates the way a team moves on, particularly when it doesn't go well. The team that we would have picked at the start of this tournament and the ones we maybe thought we could hang our hat on, it's changed, hasn't it, Sean?
I think first and foremost, Billy Gilmour's the big takeaway from the tournament. And I think I tweeted before the England game had even finished, I think he said that Billy Gilmour starts every game from now on. And then obviously didn't he start the next one, did he? So there we go, I had a nightmare there. But you can't win them all.
He's changed things. He's changed the dynamic of that team, hasn't he?
Undoubtedly. And the way that he's able to look after the ball and recycle it and shift the play, and he's a level above, I think, what we've had in that area of the park. So for me, when he's fit and when he's well, he starts for Scotland now, regardless. And I suspect, you can see from even just the impact that he had on the England game, the interest in him being ramped up, not just amongst fans, but amongst other clubs as well. You're seeing him linked with Rangers, obviously, but Wolves was another one.
Norwich is the one that's favoured.
Yeah, they'll be after getting him in on one for the season.
There's no way he's going to Rangers, by the way, is he? Not
a chance in hell. No. If there's decent Premiership outfits looking to take him on loan for a season, Chelsea will send him there rather than Rangers. So a season's football under his belt will help him even further, because at the moment, even without that, he looks a level above, I think. So he's the big one. The other thing for me, well, there's a couple other things, but one of them is McTominay. He's not a solution at centre half. He isn't. And I felt sorry for him against the Croatians, actually, because there was a couple of moments where he just looked lost positionally, and that's not where he plays. He doesn't play the game there, and I think it's a lot to ask to throw a boy in who plays in midfield into that sort of specialised role against a team that are as good as Croatia. Because I think he was found wanting a wee bit, but I don't blame him for that. There were centre halves on the bench and available, and Steve Clarke opted to use McTominay there, and I think that was a mistake. Stephen O'Donnell had a bit of a roller coaster of a tournament because he struggled in the Czech Republic game, did well in England against England, and
not as well as folk were saying. It wasn't.
No,
folk were talking up as if it was some sort.
No, he was more solid, but it was framed as a redemption because, of
course, it was
because of the level of criticism that he'd got after the Czech Republic game and before the tournament. People, including myself, kind of saying, "No, he's not up to that level."
Yeah, I've not changed my mind, Sean.
No, neither have I.
Absolutely isn't. Absolutely isn't.
So that's another area, and the question is, if it's not him, then is it Patterson? Is he ready for it? He looked okay when he's come on, but again, he's another one that a season of football will benefit him. So we'll see pretty rapidly. And I know a lot of Rangers fans will say, "Oh, he's ready." There's no doubt he's a star. There's one of them who works for us actually who says that. So Patterson's one who a season of football will do him the world of good. Up top's another area. I think because Dykes for me he's not good enough.
He's the one I was probably had in mind when I was talking about these three games, basically really exposing somebody for the level that I think all the rest are kind of there's a few were a bit disappointing, Stuart Armstrong being one of them, and a couple of others, and you thought maybe they could be that level. Dykes is the one that now I think his limitations, Jim, were really, really showing up. I think I could picture him playing in, Slovenia on a freezing cold Wednesday night. When we just need to really dig out a win. But for at that level of football, we've got to be trying to find better, which is a shame because it's not that long ago we thought he would be he was a star signing, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Dykes. I liked him when he was at Livingston, but there's a big difference between saying I like a boy that played at Scottish Premiership level and thinking that he's the answer at national level. There's a couple of things. One, you're always asking yourself, is there anyone to play
Correct,
better?
That's true.
That's the first thing you ask yourself. And the second thing you've got to ask yourself is, if there is someone who can play better, will we be guaranteed a level of consistency from him? Now, I mean, I'm a big believer that one of the things that, you know, that differentiates good players from really top players is pace. I like pace in the team, and I would find room for a Kevin Nisbet, because I think he's got an eye for goal and he's quick. He gets away, he skips past people, he goes by people quickly, and he's quick mentally and he's quick physically. Ryan Fraser I like as well. One of the things
I would have wanted to see more of Fraser.
One of the problems we had, I mean, is that lack of width. Now, I mean, I watched. I mean, Newcastle are a bit of an enigma as a club, aren't they? But I mean, I watched, you know, a lot of the highlights of their games last season, and I was always impressed with Fraser. He always managed to beat a man, and he put some delicious crosses into the box, which very often, you know, people didn't get on the end of, but that's not his problem. He put really good quality balls in the box. He got by people. He seldom squanders a ball. And he's quick. You know, he's a quick player. So you've got two guys there in Fraser and Nisbet who have kind of, you know, not necessarily electric pace, but they are very, very quick players. And you know, and we didn't have that in the team. You know, I mean, Ryan Christie arguably is another one who potentially adds more to the game. David Turnbull undoubtedly will come into the fore, and Patterson we've talked about already. So it's you know, with the World Cup qualifiers coming up, I mean, I don't think we can expect to see many players suddenly emerging from the blue yonder. You know, I don't think, for instance, that we're probably going to see a Ryan Gold, despite the fact I think it'd be worth a turn. I don't think we're going to see him emerging into the team, or somebody that none of us have really thought of before. So pretty much it's the squad that we've got. So you've got to look at the squad we've got and say, well, who emerges from that? Who looks a better bet to turn it on with more consistency and add something that we've been missing? And I think players like Nisbet and Fraser, I would want to certainly see a lot more of. Turnbull, arguably as well. He hadn't, you know, I mean, I think this tournament, for various reasons, probably wasn't going to be one he would have shone in anyhow. But I think certainly Fraser and Nisbet offer more. I agree on Dykes. I don't think at this level he's going to offer enough. Adam's different kettle of fish. Been playing a better level for longer, a higher level for longer, and I think allied to either a better partner or a different type of service might be, you know, a much more positive outcome for him than we saw in these three games. But I don't think Dykes is going to cut it into the future.
Yeah, listen, we'll just wrap it up on the Scotland thing, but I'm intrigued in general, Sean, just because we are quickly going into the World Cup qualifiers again. And remember, we're not in as rosy a position as some would, or even if you just look at the table, you think, oh, that's okay. You know, we're right under pressure straight away. And I think Denmark's our first game, and goodness knows how good they'll be feeling about themselves when this tournament finishes, because, you know, they've got a chance to go another round at least. So I think that's the one that I think the SFA and the players have helped them out here in setting the sort of the tone after it. There's been a lot of tweets and Instagram posts from the players basically saying, we've loved it, hope we've done you proud, the start of this is the beginning, not the end type thing. And that's all good and well. But if we get beaten to Denmark and all of a sudden the World Cup seems a distant dream, you're then looking at, oh, okay, things are a bit different here. So we'll be looking at whether Steve Clarke is accelerating change. Is he learning lessons, all that sort of stuff. So September, isn't it? That's going to be a big time for Steve Clarke and this Scotland team. And we've all got to hope that, you know, if we beat Denmark, I think we can really accelerate on. And as we've found out there, qualifying for Euros isn't that hard these days. So it'll be tough to get to Qatar, but you know, there's no reason why we can't look to get to the next Euros.
Eric, sorry, Sean. There's one other thing that you know, and I'm never quite sure with me. Although I've spoken to people, you know, within the game and who used to be in the game who I think shared this. One of the things that always intrigues me with watching our players is that, you know, we often talk about modern players in Scotland, they're only athletes. You know, what we really mean is they'll run all day. But see, when I watch teams like Croatia, I think they are truly athletic. And I've touched on this before. I mean, they're not just guys that can run all day, although they can. They've got a deftness of touch. They've got they look lithe bodily, their body shape, they look lithe, they look supple. They could pull a ball out the air at chest height with a foot. They're very flexible. They've got a wonderful fluidity about their body motion. We've got guys that look as though they've got rods up the back of their shirts. Now, someone I'm sure, some, biomechanic, sports scientist will be able to, nail this. But I just think that we never, ever look as lithe and flexible and comfortable by and large. So I don't know if this is something that goes wrong at a very, very early age, whether we pick the wrong type of players, going for the big laddies or whatever. We never, ever look to me as fluid in terms of body movement, body shape. There's, you often look at continental players and you think he could be a ballet dancer in a different life. He could be a 100 metres hurdler. We still look, stiff. As they used to say, the hairs of your backside are tied together. We've still got too many players who, to me,
I've never said that,
like
Jim.
Thought for the day.
I've never said it, but often felt like it.
There is great pride in being a Scotland supporter. Win, lose or draw, the Saltire flies, the songs are sung, the Hampden roar will be heard. But what was it like in the old days? The days of the huge crowds in the vast Hampden Bowl before it was all seated. If you're old enough, you'll remember. In our new book, We Had a Dream, Scotland Internationals in the Black and White Era, will remind you of those great days. If you're younger, this is the history. This is what the great days looked like. Those days are gone now, but these memories are oh so dearly held. There are photos in this book that will stir the dark blue heart. Photos of Bremner, Baxter, Law and Johnston in the days when they strode the Hampden turf before crowds of 120 or 130,000 fans. If you remember those days, this book will take you back to those days. If you want to know what it means to be a Scotland supporter, then you'll need this book to show you, not just tell you, what it means to be a Scotland supporter. As one of our podcast listeners, you can get an exclusive 15% discount on We Had a Dream at dcthompsonshop.co.uk using the code DREAM15 at checkout. That's DREAM15 at the checkout of dcthompsonshop.co.uk. Check the episode notes for details and terms. Was like us.
Right, Dundee United. Okay. Their goalie situation, Sean, I think it's becoming clear. We've always suspected that, let's face it, we've not had to read between the lines. Benjamin Siegrist is as good as said, I'm off in the summer, we're chaps, so it's about Dundee United getting the best deal that they can. United are obviously not wanting to talk money publicly, but there seems to be a bit of a consensus building that if Ipswich or whoever else it is can get to 350 grand, they get him. That's probably ballpark. There'll be a bit of truth to that. I think it'll be around that mark. Is that a reasonable fee, and in view of the fact that he's played 1 year in the top flight and he's got 1 year left on his contract? Are United fans being unrealistic when they say, "Oh, we've got a £2 million keeper here"? We've got a £1 million keeper, whatnot.
Well, I mean, the market will dictate, won't it? And yes, it is unrealistic to think you've got a £2 million keeper because the market is saying 350 grand. So that's what you're going to get, something around about there. The only way you'll get that skyrocketing is if you suddenly have two or three clubs who decide that he's the man and they want him. In lieu of that, they'll get something around about the figure that you've mentioned, and that's what it is. If Dundee United were playing in a different league in a different country, what have you, they would get more. If they were a bigger club, if they were a Celtic or a Rangers, they would be able to hold out for more, demand more. But United being as they are, they'll get they'll get what other clubs are willing to pay. So 2 million. 1 million at this stage is unrealistic because otherwise they'd be getting offers of that sort of magnitude, and they're not. It's
not one.
Is he going to be worth that much money in the future? Could well be, absolutely, no doubt about that. But at the moment, United fans could say, well, we're being done out of.
It's one of these
done out of money here. But
I
that's
don't
just
think
how it is.
There's no, you can potentially look at criticising clubs when contracts are getting down to a year and all the rest of it. But I don't think with Siegrist you can give any criticism to United.
Oh,
because
no,
let's
not
face
at
it,
all.
he was a championship player. It was his first, I dare say they probably, they did it. He has extended his contract once, hasn't he? So, once, none of them, they weren't to know he was going to play so well, and they couldn't get rid of him in January because he was so crucial to them staying up. So it's one of those where
but they were also in a position where they've been asking staff and players to take wage cuts as well.
Yeah.
So dishing out new contracts at that point isn't something that they could have done really. So no, there's no criticism attached to United for the situation. That is what it is.
It's just one of these you have to suck up, isn't it?
Absolutely, and also, let's be honest, $350,000 for a goalie, that's no bad.
Yeah, Jim.
Well, Sean nails it. The market will dictate. I hear that. I had a wee Twitter conversation today with a fellow who was talking about Ryan Gaul potentially going to Vancouver Whitecaps on $42,000 a week or something like that, and suggesting Scottish football is falling behind in wages and we need better TV deals. Yes, we need better TV deals. Is there one available? I doubt it. Is there any chance that Scottish football will pay wages like $42,000 a week in the foreseeable future? Not a danger. It's half United's turnover. So it's like, I think sometimes we've got a wholly unrealistic expectation. I hear all this stuff about we sell our players too cheaply. That's a nonsense. You sell your players, you either sell them or you don't sell them. That's the first thing. Dundee United are under no duress to sell Benjamin Siegrist. He's got a year left on his contract. However, what comes into that very strongly is, if they can get £400,000 or £500,000, I suspect that $500,000 is pushing the boat out, but if they can get £350,000, £400,000 weighed in against the quality of keeper that they can bring in to replace him, and I suspect although he's a very good keeper, I think you can get someone as good or very close to being as good, as against losing a fee which would keep your entire youth academy going for perhaps 2 years or something like that. Those are the things you've got to weigh up in the balance, So, I think realistically, he's 29, which is a good age for a keeper. He's potentially got 10 years ahead of him. You don't get massive fees by and large for goalkeepers unless they're absolutely top drawer, top of the range. He's not at the moment. He's 29, as I say. He may have a great and even better career than he's had last season ahead of him. But I think if you can get that kind of money with a year left, and I suspect the lad, he wants to go, he'll want to go to as high a level as he can. That's what football players by and large do in the modern world. So, why would you hang on for some fee which you might never ever get, shooting for the moon, when you can be guaranteed probably a fee of 300, 350, maybe 400 at a push for him? I think, it would be almost criminally negligent not to sell him. And a sell-on is, most clubs these days, for long and weary, most clubs have stuck in a 20% sell-on or something like that. And if he goes to, I don't know, if he goes to an Ipswich or a wherever he goes to, if he goes to something like that, then, you get 20% sell on. If he goes in 2 years' time for 10 million quid, then you take a fair chunk of that. So I think the bottom line is quite simple. I'm not saying you flog him for the first offer that comes in, but a reasonable offer at this stage is very probably in the £350,000, £400,000 mark, with a year left on his contract. In fact, it's probably a very good offer. Suits the player and would suit United with a sell-on as well. So I think, my suspicion for a long time has been that we wouldn't see any more of Siegrist. And that's a shame because he's been a smashing keeper. He's developed tremendously, particularly over the last season. But, United now, I think, very probably know that he's going. It's just a case of kind of angling to get the best fee and the best sell-on fee for him.
Plus, I think, Sean, the way in which the outside world rates Benjamin Siegrist is the fact that it's an Ipswich coming in from and not an English Premier League club or even, a top championship club. That's where the football world, rightly or wrongly, is deeming his level to be at, because that's the club that's showing their money, and we'll see. If an English Premier League club wanted to buy a reserve goalie, they would think nothing of spending 7 figures on it. But that's not even the worth that he's deemed to be at. So it is what it is, as team folk like to say. Sean, do you think are you like Jim that do you believe he's as replaceable as Jim thinks? Yeah,
he was very good last season. There's absolutely no denying that. But are there other good goalies out there? Yeah.
Liam Kelly's a good goalie. He's the one that's been linked.
Of course he is. Yeah, he was excellent at Livingston. He got his move, and if he's available, would be a no-brainer, really. But are there other good keepers at lower levels in Scotland? I mean, yeah, there are. I mean, there will be development prospects. I wouldn't be worried about it. I genuinely wouldn't be. And all this stuff about Jim mentioned it. This is a slight digression. I'm sorry, but it came to my mind when Jim was speaking earlier. The stuff about the TV deal in Scotland, and obviously that informs so much of how Scottish clubs are able to operate with regards to wages and what transfer fees they can pay and how they can hold off for bigger ones and what have you, or not, as the case may be. The people can say we need a better TV deal, and there might be some truth to that, and there is some truth to that. But at the same time, our market isn't big enough to demand a TV deal of the size of England or even smaller countries than that. You know, it'll be judged by TV companies on something incredibly simple, which is how many subscriptions are you driving? How many viewers are your games getting, and how many subscriptions are they driving, and therefore how much money are you making for us? And that is how we'll value your product. Now, the bottom line is we live in a country with a population of 5 million people, and that, with the way the game is marketed currently, that is a ceiling, basically, right? So the expectation that we could somehow compete for TV deals with countries with populations of 10 million, never mind 50, like England, it's crazy, because our product will never make enough money for the TV companies in order for them to justify shelling out huge money on paying to screen it. That's the bottom line.
There you are. Got that off your chest.
Sorry.
Fair point, though.
Here's one for you, Jim. We've not spoken about him for a few weeks, and we've certainly not spoken about him in terms of him moving on. But now that we've seen the market value sort of find Siegrist at about 350 grand, where's the market value for Lawrence Shankland with 1 year left in his deal and nobody having come in with a firm offer over the last year or so? Where do you see now as a figure United could expect to get if he was sold?
Well, to me, it's starting to look as though Lawrence
500 grand.
Well, it's starting to look, I have to say, as though Lawrence Shankland's career will be at Tannadice. I'm not sure who's going to come in with that kind of money for him. I mean, I think we often talk glibly, Eric, about money because to a great extent, we all like it a lump. We follow everybody follows the Premier League in England. I mean, we look at it because it makes such huge headlines. We hear transfer fees of 50 million and guys on £150,000 a week and all the rest of it. The truth of the matter is, even in England, I mean, I know the Championship is a different level, but once you start to work your way down from the Championship into Leagues 1 and Leagues 2 and all the rest of it, it starts to much more resemble Scottish football. I know there's better money on offer in many of these leagues, but it's not kind of millionaire's paradise. Now, what you've got to ask yourself is, who's going to bid for Lawrence Shankland? Is he going to the English Premier League? I don't think so. Is he going to the Championship? Possibly. Although on the back of the season he's just had, people would probably want to see a wee bit more. And like a lump it, Sean made the point earlier on. We see our league and our football in one way, and sometimes we're curmudgeonly about this. There is nothing we can do to make people see our league or view our football differently. If they view it as second-rate or substandard, there's nothing we can actually do with that. Shy of battering teams in Europe or our international team doing brilliantly or something like that. There's really not a lot that we can do about that sort of stuff. So, if people view our football along the lines of, you can pick up players at what we regard as a song, there's not a lot we can do with that, other than we can sell or we can not sell. Now, I mean, Lawrence Shankland, I think, will be one of the big earners at Tannadice. I don't think he's, I think he'll be on some of the money that I've heard some people speculating.
He'll be the top earner, won't he?
He'll be the top earner, I would imagine. Yeah, I mean, probably by a way. But who's going to come in and pay £500,000 for him? Well, again, the market
Could you see Robbie Nielsen? Could you see Robbie Nielsen going for him?
There is what I'd wonder. I would wonder, is the market for him in Scotland at a high, hesitate to say a higher level, but a bigger club than United, a club who are more cash rich.
If Hibs sell Nisbet.
Yeah, if Hibs sell Nisbet, then, that, because Hibs will probably sell Nisbet for a couple of £1 million. They already turned in 2 million if what we read is what we're to believe. So, then that money becomes available in the Scottish game. Might Aberdeen be interested? Might Hearts be interested? My suspicion is that probably, if he does move, it'll be a Scottish move. Either that or United look at him and think, we've got a really experienced guy here. He's a goal scorer. If the youth thing starts to work, if bringing in a really experienced campaigner like Charlie Mulgrew starts to work, and we can start to fire good service into Shankland, why would you not keep him? If you can, rekindle his goal scoring exploits and abilities, you might well want to keep him. Although, with a year left in his contract, you face exactly the same dilemma that we talked about with Siegrist. Do you let him walk away at the end of the end of that period for nothing? Well, that again has to be based upon A, how many goals is he liable to score for you next season? What would be the difference in prize money if he gets you further up the league? And B, is anyone actually going to come in for him and make a decent bid?
Yeah, Sean. I mean, there's a lot of points that Jim made in there. I think just to go back on, are you seeing the pendulum swinging now? I think this time last year, we all thought it would be his likely move would be to the English Championship. Same as in January. Are you starting to think that it's either staying at United or Scotland as well? And which of those two would be more likely?
That feels about right. I think probably staying at United seems the most likely outcome to me at this point.
So you think a new contract which keeps both, then it gives United a bit more power again. Should he have a brilliant season, and with some clause saying, setting his, from Shankland's point of view, saying if so and so come in, I get to go.
Will we see a new contract? I really don't know. And it was touched on in terms of, is he the top earner at the club? Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. So if you're wanting to extend that contract, then there's actually, and this is not to do Shankland down at all, but there's a calculated risk involved in that sort of, in a new contract situation with a guy like Shankland, who's your top earner, because the risk is that you give him another year and he doesn't perform as you would expect him to perform, or another 2 years and he doesn't perform as you expect him to perform, and you've got a guy who's on a high wage who's not doing the business. If you leave it and then suddenly he catches fire this season, then you've done yourself in. So there'll be a bit of mental arithmetic going on at Tannadice to try and establish what the correct course of action is with Lawrence Shankland.
Oh, actually, I think you're right.
It's not an easy thing.
It's incredibly tricky one, because they're not even, they can't even be sure what level of player they've got, because as Jim said, he's not had a great season. And then you can open that up and say, well, was that because of Mickey Mellon's tactics? Was it because of the players around him? Was it because of an injury? There's very little certainty around Lawrence Shankland in terms of his value, B, the quality of the player, and C, where he could potentially go. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Tony Ashgar and Mark Ogren making these decisions about, or even Lawrence Shankland.
Difficult. Very difficult.
Even Lawrence Shankland.
What makes it even more difficult is the fact that we can sit here and say that he didn't have a great season, but there were moments of magic in there, weren't there? Like not a great deal, but there were a few moments where you just looked at him, a few finishes, a few goals, and you just thought, that's a bit special, So that makes it even more difficult, because if you're minded to, you could easily convince yourself that no, we've still got a player here, we definitely do, and we need to deal him in. But then there's a risk involved in that as well.
It depends what people look at. I mean, teams use all sorts of devices. From kind of just the eyes of the scout who'll come to see him, to all sorts of other devices. But the truth of the matter is, ultimately, at the end of the day, people will look at the stats and they'll go on the basis of what they've actually seen, they had him watched, and all the rest of it. I mean, he played out at 35 games last season and scored 9 goals. Now, there was a period of injury and all the rest of it in there, we know that. But it's not the kind of form that he seemed to be heading in the direction of. There was a spell where you thought, wow, he could end up going to the Championship for $1 million, $1.5 million, maybe a bit more. That, I think, has gone for the moment. But bear in mind, Shankland's only, 25 now? So he's got a lot of football ahead of him. He's actually at a very good age. And he is actually still learning the game as well. And I think, although he dropped too deep under Mellon for my liking and didn't get nearly sufficient service, when he did drop deep, he was very useful. He gave out, he very seldom squandered the ball when he had possession. He played a nice, easy pass, retained possession, all the rest of it. Started to show he could link up very well. We'd all much rather seen him playing further up front because he takes goals very well. But for the moment, you kind of sense that last season his career kind of stalled a bit. In terms of the high expectations that people had of him. So I think probably, he has to, if he's going to stay at United, he probably has to regenerate himself, because remember, a bid might come in for him early in the season if he starts to kind of play very well and score goals again. Until the window opens, somebody might come in for with a bid for him. Very often 6-7 games into the season is where you want to be. People elsewhere are starting to panic, thinking, the strike force we've got, the striker we've got isn't doing it. That boy Shankland's doing well, let's get a bid in for him. There are just so many variables in football between players form, loss of form, midway for him, and what other clubs do, what money's available and all the rest of it. That it's trying to, you try to read a crystal ball with this sort of stuff. But for the moment, with a year left on his deal, unless United get some kind of ridiculous offer, and then you've got the same scenario as you had with Siegrist, can they replace him? Now, I think, to be honest with you, I think it's more difficult to replace, it's more difficult to replace the Shankland we knew, with another proven goal scorer than it is to replace Shankland on his goal scoring record last season. Similar to Siegrist, can they get a goalkeeper as good as Siegrist? Maybe not far off it. Can they get a striker as good as Shankland has the potential to be? I'm not sure at United if they can. So there are all those factors to weigh up.
Clear as mud. Just before we wrap it up, Sean, Dundee have made a sign-in. Ryan Sweeney. It's in general. It's the calm before the storm, isn't it? You're not expecting. There's not a lot of movement in the market just now. But Dundee are gonna. I still think. Are we still thinking Dundee will reach about 4 signings, possibly around about that mark?
Yeah. I think that's probably ballpark correct. They need. I think we've spoken before and said they do need a few faces in. They do have guys who've played at a high level,
and they needed a centre half, didn't they? I could be doing you a disservice here, but your knowledge of Mansfield and Ryan Sweeney, but so we'll probably wait till we see him play before we start picking his game apart. But it was a position that you fully expected them to strengthen, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. They did all right there towards the end of the season, to be fair to them. But they did have a big spell through the start and then through the middle of the season where they were conceding a lot of goals, particularly from set pieces as well. So you would expect a big. I'm not going to say lumbering; that would be unfair. He may have the grace of the lithe.
You have been watching Mansfield, haven't you?
No, he may have the grace Jim was speaking about before, but we shall see. But you would expect a big laddie to come in and give them a bit of support and strength in that area where at times last season they were maybe lacking it. So yeah, that's certainly one of the areas, and I expect we'll see another 3 or 4, but. Who knows? It's Dundee. There's always a left field one. I was going to say that way, Jim. You can have the last word. I always think Dundee they're great for us. It doesn't matter what league they're in. They'll guarantee us a sort of wow signing, won't they? There'll be one that you'll go. It'll either be like a fading star, but there'll be you know what I mean, Jim. They're quite box office for their signings, Dundee, aren't they? Yeah, at least one of them.
I don't know if Ryan Sweeney's up his box office, but I'm not
talking about Ryan Sweeney. I'm talking about one to come. I'm talking about it'll be like a Maverick. There'll be another Maverick striker or something like that, won't there?
Listen, they pulled Charlie Adam out of that. We knew that the Charlie Adam thing was kind of ongoing.
Cummings as well, they bring personality players in, don't they? And then you can go back to Dorrans before that.
Yeah, fans like that. At the end of the day, I always say this, Eric, football's bread and circuses. Football is theatre, it's entertainment. and that's what it's about. It's about entertaining people, and pulling something different out of the hat and all the rest of it. Instead of the same old. So it may well be that James McPake has that one up his sleeve. I mean, the Sweeney thing's a different kettle of fish entirely. He's coming from a club. 122 appearances for Mansfield, so he's although he's still youngish, he's got a bit of experience there, and he's come from what I still prefer to call the old fourth division of English football. But there's been some big clubs in there. When Bolton are in League Two, Tranmere, Mickey Mellon's got a mob are in there, Oldham, clubs like that, so I mean, it's been a tough enough league. Be interesting to see what he does. But in terms of box office, there's two things I'll be looking for this season. I mean, to see how Charlie Adam does, because I still think he is a better striker, passer of a ball than just about anything else in Scottish football. So it'll be good to see him back in the Premiership. And if they can pull out something that's kind of box office, a fading star who needs to kind of re-shine again, or something like that.
The one, isn't
They have certainly done it over the years. It's not quite like the Peter and Jimmy Marr days when you never knew who was turning up next, whether it was Kinigi or Namzadze or something like that. But it would be nice to see something be pulled at the hat to entertain the troops.
Entertain us, yeah, brilliant stuff. All right, cheers, guys, and thank you very much for listening again. We'll be back next week. Bye bye just now.
If you like the podcast, we'd be grateful if you tell your pals about it, or even better, leave a review or a simple rating on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. All that really helps people to find Talking Football, and that means a lot to us. Don't forget to pick up your copy of The Courier Monday to Saturday, or go to thecourier.co.uk/subscribe to find out how to get our award-winning sport, business and local journalism across Tayside and Fife in the way that's right for you. The Courier. Local matters.